Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Triple N Media. I am Dr. NIK NIKAM. The feature presentation is Can ChatGPT do the research and write my YouTube script for a YouTube feature which I am trying to create, namely a best blood pressure app for a smartphone or a smart device. Let's see how much information we can get from ChatGPT and if it can help us to expedite the process of researching on the topic of best BP app, and in terms of creating a presentation and presenting this presentation. So this includes two parts. One is the role of ChatGPT in helping me do the research and writing, and the second part is looking at the best app, comparing their features and see if they are good or not. So let us begin with the feature presentation. If you were to search through an app store, Android or Apple operating system, you're going to see hundreds of apps available to monitor your blood pressure, track your blood pressure, and some even say they can measure your blood pressure. Here's an example of where there's a little fingerprint. You just place your finger and bingo, you get your blood pressure reading and pulse. Is that simple? Really? How accurate is that? And how do we know these apps are reliable sources of information? How do they compare with the conventional arm or the wrist blood pressure machines that we use routinely in offices or in homes or at homes? Okay, so my first question that I posed was, are there any good blood pressure measuring apps? I want you to pay attention to the key word I said, measuring apps. I didn't say track, I didn't say monitor, I didn't say follow. Somehow the ChatGPT may not get you the right answer you're looking for, and we may have to ask the question in different forms. But nonetheless, it listed like blood pressure tracker, eye blood pressure companion, heart habit. These are some of the apps that can do a lot of things: pulse, blood pressure, maybe even oxygen saturation, all these things. But they are not actually the apps that really record the blood pressure, like the one you saw in the first picture, where you put your thumb or you put your finger on the back of the camera and it records the blood pressure. But from what I can gather, that's not it. So I may have to do something different. I said, how accurate are these blood pressure measuring apps compared to the arm and wrist blood pressure monitoring systems? And it came up with a long prose which distills down to this one study of the Journal of the American Society of Hypertension, reported in 2016, that compared the blood pressure measurements by the BP apps with the conventional method, and they found there was a 10 millimeter difference in the blood pressure. Maybe that's not that bad. I mean, if somebody is having 120 versus 200, it may help to identify, but that's not the end of the story. So we need to explore some more. So that means we need to know what are the questions we need to ask. I'm a cardiologist. I've been a cardiologist for 40 years, and I've been treating blood pressure for decades. So I know what are the things I am looking for when I'm trying to download an app for measuring blood pressure. Okay. A couple of basic foundation upon which these apps are supposed to work. They may work in different ways in different operating systems and on different smart devices, be it phone, watch, pad, whatever you want to call them. Anyway, this is based on the blood flow in your fingertips if you're using a camera light. And that light will capture the movement of red blood cells. From there, it will measure the pulse, it will measure the saturation, and some of them are supposed to measure the blood pressure. We'll find out if there are any that does it. And this light is reflected from this reflectometer, and from there it calculates using a formula. And there are a few other things that are in the smartphones, that is the gyroscope. That is, it determines the position of the phone, and if the phone is stable, the camera can detect the position of the blood movement and thus produce this waveform, which we usually see with the pulse oximeter. We have the pulse rate here, we have the oxygen saturation, and then we have the waveforms. And the gyroscope, by observing the blood flow moment, as you know, the blood doesn't flow like a straight water coming out of a faucet. It is pulsatile. That's why it is called a pulse. See, every time the pulse goes up and the pulse comes down, pulse goes up, comes down. So that's what it's measuring. The gyroscope helps to identify that. So that's the mechanism by which you are able to measure these numbers, and they added the blood pressure too. But I like to see if that really works. My next question was, most medical devices and medical studies have to be approved by the FDA, Food and Drug Administration. And I asked, who regulates these apps? They said these apps have to be FDA approved. Not all apps are FDA approved, and even the ones which are approved may have irregularities in the readings depending upon how well the system works, the device sensitivity. It depends upon the position of the finger or the thumb, and many other factors, like if you're sweating. All these different things come into play besides just the blood pressure. Okay, there are familiar names which we are all accustomed to, like Omron blood pressure monitoring machine, which is available in drugstores and supermarkets. Same thing with Allen Welch, and they all say they produce blood pressure monitoring apps. I want to make you a little distinction here. As I said, I was looking for blood pressure recording app, but later on you will find out that's not what these apps actually do. Then, how do these FDA blood pressure measuring apps compare with reference to accuracy among themselves and with the conventional methods? And again, it quotes a couple of studies here. 2018 compared the accuracy of several FDA approved blood pressure machines, and they found a variation of 10 millimeters of mercury. And an article reported in Journal of Medicine Internet Research in 2019 said the accuracy varied widely among apps. So there you got it. Just because you found an app on your device doesn't mean you can download it and rely on it, or maybe change your medications based on that. That means you have to do your due diligence. You need to look at several different sources, not just ChatGPT or just one presentation. You have to look at several different presentations and see. As I said, it depends upon the device sensors, how well you follow the instructions, and calibration of the app. Who calibrates your app? There's nobody calibrating your app. The next thing is, as I said, if you were to search for a blood pressure measuring app, you see a list of more than 100 different apps, and you get all kinds of different variations and permutations. But the real thing is, what are you looking for, and how reliable is this, and how accurate is compared to the conventional methods, and what is the cost involved? Let me tell you, all these apps don't come free. The ones which come free have very limited functionality. Okay, which are the FDA approved blood pressure measuring apps? look at, I'm posing the question, measuring apps. It keeps connecting me to all these things that take the readings, track the readings, create graphs, remind you of checking your blood pressure, all kinds of stuff. So the cardiac arm, which is supposed to be a popular one based upon all the studies which I have done so far, and it is, this app measures blood pressure, heart rate. It says measures blood pressure, but I'll explain as how it measures blood pressure later on in the presentation. And same thing with the Omron Connect, and same thing with the HeartMate, Allen Welch. These are all monitoring devices. They don't actually measure the blood pressure, except a couple of them which use the fingerprint which I showed you, or a camera light to look for the movement of the red blood cells. So again, the FDA approval doesn't mean it guarantees these apps are super accurate. Is there a study that looking at Apple operating system versus Android, if there's a difference in these apps? It just came up with the same reference to this Journal of Internal Medicine Research comparing different apps, and they determined the accuracy and efficacy of blood pressure monitoring apps on different platforms were different. Okay, there you got it. There's another article which we already talked about, Journal of Hypertension in 2018, comparing the accuracy of several blood pressure monitoring apps, and they concluded others provided significantly inaccurate readings. So some provided decent readings, some provided inaccurate readings. Then you're going to see this top 5 apps. I don't know who determines top 5 apps. Is this done by a medical professional? Is this done by a medical institution using these different apps and doing the research? Or someone is just putting up a video saying top 5 apps for measuring your blood pressure? So you need to be careful about these kinds of terminologies, because they could be highly misleading. Okay. Then I asked the question, if the accuracy of these apps varied so much on iOS or Android devices, how did the FDA approve these apps to begin with? This is more like a medical interrogation. But anyway, the bottom line is ChatGPT came up with a description that FDA relies on the internal studies done by the developers. So internal study done by the companies, of course they are going to come up with favorable results, but has this been checked by other sources? And as we saw in the previous studies, they found inconsistencies. But I'm getting all this text from ChatGPT by just posing some interesting questions. That's how you can create a presentation. Can you be more specific? What study did the FDA looked at in approving these apps? Again, he said FDA does not publish the list of the articles that it used in substantiating its decision making. I say that's strange, because like if a FDA were to approve a particular drug, or if FDA were to approve a particular vaccine, they rely upon the studies upon which these drugs were submitted to FDA for approval. But here it says they don't publish. Yes, they are company-based articles, but still there should be some information. And the ChatGPT says, well, you may be able to find the summary of the study results. So there you go. You're learning. That's a good thing. ChatGPT does help. Let's move on now. And here is an app which says that you can put your finger on the camera, the one which I showed you the previous at the beginning, and it can monitor your pulse rate, it can monitor your systolic blood pressure, and it can monitor your diastolic blood pressure. But I couldn't find what app is this, because there was no name for this app. Anyway, let's talk about device sensors. How does iPhone device sensor compare with other brands in relationship to measuring blood pressure? It didn't come up with a very good description, except saying that each hardware is different, their calibrations are different, and the techniques used by them are different. One is using the gyroscope, another one is using the photoplethysmography, which is the flow of objects. In this case, it is the red blood cells that determines the movement and then calculates the oxygen level, the pulse rate, and the waveform, which I showed you previously. Then ChatGPT kept saying you should do your own research. I asked ChatGPT, are you kidding me? You expect a consumer to do a medical research and find out which one is the best app? Is that the best answer you can come up with? And it says, oh, well, I didn't mean to say that. You can check from other sources or talk to your medical experts. And medical experts are not going to invest their time in evaluating and recommending a consumer product or a service which they don't deal with on a daily basis. I'm saying this from my personal experience, but I can show you how we incorporate our personal knowledge with the knowledge from ChatGPT and create a meaningful presentation. I don't know if it's been meaningful so far, but let's continue. Anyway, while we are on the subject of blood pressure, you can just Google images and you can get this. The normal blood pressure should be less than 120 over 80 millimeters of mercury. And if your blood pressure is more than systolic 130 to 139 or diastolic 80 to 89, you are supposed to have stage 1 hypertension. Then you have stage 2 and stage 3 hypertension. You can just pause the video and look at these numbers. Let's see. Then I said, finally, based on the references you have quoted, for an iOS system, which app has the best blood pressure measurement, correlation, and application in the real world? No lectures, please. So I got tired of these lectures, going around circles, giving generalized statements, then concluding and saying, oh, you should do your own research, you should follow experts' opinion, you should follow your consultants' recommendations, all this stuff. Anyway, it came up with one recommendation, Cardiology blood pressure measuring app for iOS, and this was based on the study by Kohler et al. In 2019, was accurate, reliable enough to be used in a primary care setting. So finally, we got some kind of a finally we got some kind of a direction as where to look for and see what we can get out of this. But that's not the end of the story. We still have a lot more work to do. They pose the question, you expecting a consumer to do a medical research? Your advice seems to be misleading, don't you think? And it says, I'm sorry, I apologize, I didn't mean to say that. I'm just presenting the information based on the information I have, which is important for us to understand that it is just consolidating the facts from the database and giving you the answers. That may not be the complete answer. That may not be the answer you're looking for. So you need to be able to discern what you're getting is relevant to you or not. Just because it gives doesn't mean it is accurate. So here is Omron, which is available in the App Store. And the interesting thing is, if you go to App Store and download this one, but then you find out it does not record the blood pressure like I anticipated using the camera or a fingerprint, but basically it wants you to connect to one of those arm or the wrist device, so it can record numbers from that reading from the blood pressure recording, and then track them, store them, graph them, and produce maybe even an EKG. So that's what I understood. Not only that, these apps are not free, and these apps are going to be on your payroll for life. For example, some of these apps cost like $99 a year. So if you think these apps are free, they are not. That's another thing you find out, not only by just doing ChatGPT, which may not give you this information, But I'll show you how we need to expand our ChatGPT. You may be wondering, how did I get all these pictures? Did ChatGPT give me the pictures? No. See, I asked ChatGPT the real technical questions to get the analysis of the topic. Then my next step is to how do I select even a given phone or an operating system or a particular app. To do that, it is totally confusing, and everybody you talk to are going to give you a different opinion. So what I usually do is, this is again re-emphasizing cardio arm, which we'll talk about in a minute. So here's like cardio arm, $99, and see, it records your blood pressure, but not by itself, the smartphone, but you have to use this cuff device which you apply to your elbow or a wrist one. I don't know, whatever is available. So the price varies quite dramatically. And I got these images from Google Images. So here is a secret. First, you get all your text from ChatGPT, then go to Google Images and post similar questions and try to see what good quality images you can get that are relevant and that are pertinent. Like here, for example, the actual app and the accessory you need to get and the cost. So you can look at all this and the variability of the cost depending upon where you get it from. The next thing is to make sure that you compare your app with the conventional blood pressure machine so that the readings are fairly accurate, maybe not exact. You don't, even if you take the same machine and record it 3 times, you're going to get 3 different numbers, which I will guarantee you that because I have tried it so many times and I know that's what happens. Anyway, so this is what I would do. I will go to Google Images and put smartphones and then smartphone functionality. How do you measure blood pressure using smartphones? And that's where I got all this gyroscope and the finger pulse meter and all these things. That you get these things. And the other part is the pexels, which is free. These are video clips ranging from 10 seconds to 30 seconds. There were not a whole lot of video clips based on smartphones, smart apps and all these things, but these are some of the things that I came across. I just wanted to show you. So by starting off with ChatGPT, asking the relevant questions, getting the answers, and then following up with the more intriguing questions, you can get the flow of the presentation in a text format with some real references, like the ones we got, the Journal of Medicine, the American Journal of Research, all these things, and we can take those, then go to Google Images, get the appropriate images, go to Pexels or any other video source and get beautiful video clips, and putting them all together, you will be able to create this presentation like the one I have done. So this presentation has served 2 purposes. Number 1, how to use ChatGPT to create your next YouTube video on any topic for that matter, and 2, what are the best apps available in the market for monitoring blood pressures. Talking about best apps, one research study looked at 107 apps. I thought there were hundreds, but there's 107 apps for hypertension, and 3/4 offering tracking capabilities, which is not you're looking for. In my case, which was not I was looking for in my case, doctors warn that using a camera to analyze blood flow are bogus in terms of monitoring your blood pressure. That's one of the research studies, but that's not the end of the world. But you get the overall picture that most of these apps don't have the accuracy to measure your blood pressure, based upon which you can either change your medications or do any kind of modifications. These apps may help you to, monitor your pulse, oxygen saturation, and may also look for irregular heartbeats, because if the waveforms are not regular, that means you may have irregular heartbeat. But as far as monitoring blood pressure, you have to use an accessory device like the elbow or the wrist band to record the blood pressure, and then it will track numbers and create graphs, things like that. So ladies and gentlemen, this is a quick synopsis of the journey using ChatGPT to produce this particular video. and combining that with Google Images and Pexel video clips. I didn't put any video clips because I didn't find anything useful, but in your presentation you may be able to find that. And so if you are trying to look at these apps, watch all the reviews and look at multiple sources of information, not just rely on one source, to make sure you have some sense. Then if you want, you can download the app, just check it. But as I said, most of the commercial apps cost quite significant amount of money. So ladies and gentlemen, whether you're selecting an iPhone or an Android device and you're looking for a blood pressure app, keep in mind the choice is not based on color or size or the operating system, but it is going to be based upon their ability to monitor blood pressure or record blood pressure. But from my observation, what I have found is I don't think there's an app that can accurately measure your blood pressure based on the camera or a fingerprint. That's my personal opinion. I mean, you're entitled for your opinion. So ladies and gentlemen, this is a quick synopsis of how to use ChatGPT to do your research, to do your writing, and then prepare your video presentation on any given topic. Thank you so much for watching this presentation, and I will see you in the next chapter of ChatGPT application in the medical field. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'll see you. Bye.